Think about it. Driving is incredibly risky. We're literally hurtling down roads in metal boxes at high speeds, trusting that everyone else will simply follow the rules. It's actually one of the most dangerous things we do on a regular basis. Every time you get behind the wheel, you are accepting risk. You could get in an accident, someone could hit you, mechanical failure could happen, but you drive anyway because that's how you get to where you want to go. We accept the risks of driving because the alternative is staying home and never going anywhere. Same with life. We accept the risks of truly living because the alternative is staying parked and never really experiencing anything. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Get In You Are Driving. I'm Maria and I'm your host. And today we're talking about something that affects every single one of us, which is fear. And I started this podcast to remind you and also myself that you have agency because you are always the one driving in your life, no matter. And all you have to do is get back in your car day after day and have the courage to keep driving forward. So, when you really think about it, every single day we take countless risks without even thinking about them. And one of those is being driving, as I just now pointed out. But we also risk getting hurt when we form relationships. We risk failure when we pursue our dreams. We risk rejection when we put ourselves out there. We risk disappointment when we hope for something better. Life itself is one big risk, which is why I titled this To Truly Drive is to Risk. But here is what's fascinating. We've become so comfortable with some risks, like driving, that we don't even think about them anymore. Yet we let other fears, often much smaller ones, completely paralyze us. Again, we'll drive 70 miles per hour on the highway without blinking, but we're terrified to apply for a job we want, or we're terrified to have a difficult conversation with someone we love, or we're terrified to maybe move to a new city. The list goes on and on. So the difference here isn't the actual level of risk. The difference is our perception of it. And that's what we're going to unpack in today's episode. We're going to talk about how fear gets planted in us, how to recognize which fears are actually yours versus the ones that have been projected onto you, and most importantly, how to build what I learned from a book that I just read called Mental Armor so you can stay in the driver's seat of your own life. Because as I always say, at the end of the day, to truly drive, whether we're talking about a car or in your life, is to risk. But you're tougher than you think. So again, life is tough, you are tougher, and it's time to start acting like it. So let's get into the bulk of today's episode. The truth about fear is going to be our first section. So, yeah, let's talk about fear. Because here's what's wild about fear is that it's not all created equal, right? There's actually a kind of fear that serves you, and then there's the kind of fear that completely paralyzes you, right? Maybe you have thought about this, maybe you have not. Well, here I am helping you think about it. So let's talk about the fear that serves you because that might sound odd, but once I explain it, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, this is the type of fear that literally keeps you alive, right? It's what stops you from speeding down the freeway at 120 miles per hour. It's what stops you when a bike is headed your way and you don't want it to hit you. It's what stops you when you look both ways when you're crossing the street, right? This is the fear that reminds you to not do reckless things that could genuinely hurt you. And this fear has a purpose. It's rooted in reality and it is protecting you from actual danger. We all need to have this fear. And fun fact about um at least in the States, if you're a woman, your car insurance is cheaper than if you're a man because men are known to be more reckless when driving. Anyways, I just find that so interesting. So women tend to have more of that healthy fear than men because, okay, men have the healthy fear as well, but they're also adrenaline junkies. Anyways, fun fact that I learned, interesting. So, but most fear, so that's a certain type of fear, right? Most fear is not like that at all. Most fear is extremely paralyzing and it's not rooted in reality. It's rooted in perception. It comes from imagined outcomes, worst case scenarios that we've never actually tested or lived, and assumptions we've built up in our minds. And if we never pause to question those fears, they can really end up ruling our lives far more than they should be able to. This is where it gets interesting though, because right now we're living in a time where fear is constantly being fueled, especially by the media and social media. I would argue mostly by the media. I mean, think of how different your life would be if you did not know everything that was going on around the world all the time. We'd be a lot more peaceful, my friends, a lot more peaceful. And I'm not just talking obvious stuff like wars, economic collapse, political chaos. Like, I'm talking about even the messages that are being told to us, specifically my generation, Gen Z, all over the news all the time that I think are particularly like heartbreaking. Gen Z can't afford housing. The world is so dangerous now. Watch where you go. Salaries don't match the cost of living. You're never going to be able to do this. Good luck finding an emotionally intelligent man as a young, successful woman. The economy is terrible. Everything is different. Everything is harder. Blah, 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 blah. Like, let's stop. Because I don't know about you, but that's what my feed is full of. And it's extremely overwhelming and it's just terrible. So I know this sounds familiar because, again, if you're in your 20s or even if you're a millennial, you've been bombarded with these messages by the media. It's just everywhere. Headlines, it's even in casual conversations. I mean, it shows up everywhere. And the thing about this kind of messaging is that it works. My friends, it works because as humans, we are wired to respond more strongly to fear than hope. We're like the curious cats that end up getting killed because they're too dang curious. Like we lean into it. We can't help it, right? Like we can't help it. We're also reactive creatures. But what I've realized is that the media might play a role in fueling our fears, but the strongest opponent is actually ourselves, our minds, our interpretations, and the stories we are creating around the fears that we're hearing. Most of our stress and fear doesn't come from life itself. It comes from how we respond to life. And how we respond to life is something that I talk about in this podcast all the time. And this is my point of how you respond is what makes you the driver. And this is what makes you in control. How we respond, it comes from how we feel about a situation, what memories and emotions we've attached to it. Think about it this way. Yes, there may be truth behind why we fear something, but that fear becomes amplified by past experiences, maybe our parents, our culture, stories we've heard, things we've seen, assumptions we've never challenged. The fear feels real because it is real, but it's not always true in the way it controls us. Take something like, let's say, the fear of rejection. Maybe you put yourself out there once and it didn't go well. Now the idea of your rejection again becomes absolutely unbearable. You don't even want to think about that. Is that fear valid that you're feeling? Yeah, of course it's valid. But the truth is, even if someone does reject you, you will survive. Life will go on. You'll figure it out. Fear always feels huge because it taps into something usually old and familiar, but the actual reality of experiencing rejection, the example I used, right? It's manageable. And I would argue this for all fear in general. Let's talk about perhaps now another example of a financial fear. Maybe you grew up hearing conversations about money always being tight, or you've absorbed all these messages about how it is just impossible to get ahead financially. This creates a narrative around money in your head, a story that you told yourself, which is that money is scarce. It's always slipping away. And so fear attaches itself to that belief and it makes a home within you. But how much of that fear is based on your actual current situation? And how much is based on inherited stories and societal messaging and perhaps what you went through as a child, how your family saw money, whatever. Most of our fears aren't actually rooted in truth. They're rooted in perception. And here's the key insight that changes everything, and I want you to listen to me. If you cannot change a situation, change your perception of it. I read this on a Substack not too long ago, and it's really stuck with me for a while now because it really made me dissect my biggest fears. And I came to the conclusion they were all connected and all rooted in my perception and my own personal fears because of experiences I had. So, I'm not trying to be Miss Toxic Positivity and everything's okay all the time. Da, da, da. I just want you to recognize that, again, you have so much more power than you think. Hence the name of this podcast. You're driving, you're in control. And there are very few things in this life we control. But luckily, one of the things we do control is perception. So, I want you to think about that. Most of the time, the situation isn't actually the problem when it comes to fear. The problem is the story you're telling yourself about said situation. How fears get planted is going to be the next thing that we talked about. So, again, we went over the truth about fear, that it's all a perception for the most part. I read in the book, I don't know if it's statistically true. That's why I didn't want to say in it, this book I've been reading about fear, that the only innate human fears are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. But I couldn't find the stat on that. But it actually makes a lot of sense. And then her argument was that the rest are perception and inherited. So, anyways, I thought that was cool. But yeah, how fear gets planted. So now that we know most fear is learned and it's perception based, I want to talk about how it gets planted in us because I think understanding this is crucial to taking your power back. So, fear is contagious. Seriously, fear is contagious. I actually think fear is a very spiritual thing because it's something that lives within us and can easily take control of us if we don't keep it in check. It spreads from person to person like a virus, and most of the time we don't even realize it's happening, but we're all incredibly sensitive to it. Think about it this way. How easily do people begin to panic in certain situations? Let's say there's an airplane turbulence it's just a little bit, everybody freaks out, right? Like, it's just contagious. It's very hard to stay calm in a lot of situations. So again, people get scared when the news of natural disaster is coming. Disaster is coming. I remember I grew up in an area where there were regular hurricanes, and I saw firsthand how, as soon as the news started talking about a hurricane coming, people would literally run to the grocery stores. I mean, run to the grocery stores, buy everything they could, stuff it in their car, and the shelves would be cleared within an afternoon. Again, panic arose. I mean, people would buy water, batteries, canned food. So when there's emergency situations like this, people, it's like they hear sirens and gunshots going off and everyone loses it. We become like sheep, so scared of everything and feeding off of each other's panic. And I say all this because I think it really proves the point that fear is contagious. Think about it. How differently would this situation be if no one freaked out? Of course, that's never going to happen. We're never going to be able to experience that. But sometimes I think about too how with governments, the government's like, if you think the government tells us everything, oh my. Listen, I don't want to get into like conspiracy theories and touch, but I definitely think that the governments are not telling us everything all the time because we'd freak out. We wouldn't be able to handle it. It's like, take it down to a parent-child level. You're not telling your kids everything, right? Like, they can't handle it. They're too little. Anyways, that's just another little rant of mine. So, okay. But fear doesn't just spread in crisis situations, right? I use that as an extreme to give an example of how I do think fear is contagious. But I want you to also think about how this plays out in daily life. You mentioned something, let's say you're excited about, and this is an experience I've lived time and time again, which is why I use it as an example. Maybe you say you want to travel somewhere, or you're considering a career change, or you have this idea that you're thinking about, you're passionate about, whatnot. And let's say you share it with someone. Generally, as a rule of thumb, a typical response that you will get, I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'm going to be pretty like, this could happen, is negative. It's discouragement. It's, oh, but that's too expensive. And oh, don't travel to Guatemala. It's so dangerous there. Or, oh, that's a really hard industry to break into. And shouldn't you pick something stable? Or, oh, I heard this terrible thing that happened in the place you want to go. Oh, don't move there. The taxes are so high. It's not like it was when I was a young girl and you could walk around the city. And oh, this and oh, that. And can I just say the amount of crap I heard, and I really realized that I needed to stop listening to people. But again, this is fear-based responding, right? And this is what's really happening though. But this took me way too long to figure out, but thank God I figured it out. People are projecting to you their own fears, their own limitation, people are projecting onto you their own fears, their own limitations, their own unresolved issues onto you. And most of the time, because I want to be clear, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, they don't mean to be harmful. This is human nature. They do it nonetheless. And the thing is, though, if you're not careful and you're sharing all these things with people, whatever, this is going to mess with your head. It's going to get in your head. It's going to start to pile onto your own personal fears. And suddenly, you're not just carrying your own weight of fear. Now you're beginning to carry on everybody else's fear. And then this happens, think about it, on a macro level, even as a culture, as countries. Think about how crazy it is that certain countries, and if you come from a certain place in the world, you have certain fears. So crazy. Something I learned about Spanish people was that they have a huge fear of taking risk. Huge. And I confirmed it with my very close Spanish friend of like things that they talked about in school and her classes, that this was something they studied, that it was a very Spanish cultural phenomenon, that they were people that had a fear of taking risks. Why? Why? Probably because of the media, probably because what people are talking about on the day to day, probably because of the economy, right? Like, again, fear is so freaking contagious. But I bring this up to show you that it's also based upon the world we're living in, the people around us, the culture. Like, so many of your fears are fears projected onto you and not necessarily your own. Like, of course, we all have our own fears, but you get what I'm trying to say here. So again, you have to be careful that this stuff doesn't get in your head. I want you to think about this. How many times have you shared something with someone, back to the whole sharing something with someone and it being a negative response, to walk away feeling super deflated? Or how many times have you left a conversation carrying fears that you didn't even have, but now somebody told you you need to watch out for a critter when you go to Peru? And you're like, what? I mean, me and my friend have this thing where we didn't know about something. It usually happens with TikTok, and then we're on TikTok, and then it'll be a video of whatever, and then we're like, new fear unlocked. New fear unlocked. I didn't even know that could happen. I didn't even know you could fall that way. I didn't even know this animal existed. I didn't even know guys were at it, whatever it is, and we're always like, new fear unlocked, right? You had no idea that could happen, but now you know. So, this is what I think is, you could call, the emotional reality of fear, that quiet rage you feel when you're like learning about these new fears that you didn't have, or you feel like you're constantly met with negativity from people. It's exhaustion from being surrounded by people who default to fear and default to discouragement and default to fear again, like being contagious. And I think that feeling of being starved for encouragement, starved for someone to say, actually, you telling me you want to move to New York City sounds amazing. You should go for it, and you'll figure out whatever problems come up then. Like, how I wish people would have told me that. But this is the thing. Most people don't realize that a lot of the fear they're projecting onto you comes from their own poor decisions, their own mistakes, or fears they've inherited but never challenged, and that it has everything to do with them and very little to do with you. So, here's the thing that most people don't realize, including yourself, which is, again, a lot of the fear that they're projecting onto you comes from their own poor decision makings, their own mistakes, or fears they inherited but never challenged. And again, it has everything to do with them and very little to do with you. Now, this is going back to me using the example of telling people about yourself or things that you want and them just like shutting it down. And it doesn't even have to be that you share something, but think about how many conversations you go into that are just so fear based. They're so negative. You know, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it took me a minute to figure out that I couldn't allow this to enter my head. And I needed to be really careful about what I allowed to upset me. And this is something we're going to get into later about this concept of having a mental armor. And yeah, so again, when people do this, including you and me, it's usually because we're speaking from our own pain, our own limitations. We think of examples of how things went wrong for us. And it's usually just a mechanism to protect ourselves from probably having to face maybe our own regrets and chances that we didn't take and things we didn't do. So this is why it's so important to take inventory of whose fears that you're actually carrying around on a personal level, on a familial level, on a extended family level, on a friend's level, on a cultural level, on your personal, if you grew up in the States like me, on a state level perhaps, right? Like you need to like look at all the things that could be affecting you from micro to macro. And I think it's just a really good exercise to do because I guarantee a lot of the fears that truly might be weighing you down are sincerely not your own. Ask yourself, whose voice is that in my head? When you hear the inner critic telling you something is maybe too risky, expensive, difficult, whose voice does that sound like? Is it maybe a parent's voice, a friend's voice, society's voice, the news, social media, your favorite influencer on TikTok, like whoever, right? Because the truth that you need to face is that you've been letting other people drive your own fear response. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad about that. I mean, I was doing that as well. It's just that you need to be aware of it. That's all. Like, it's a human thing, right? Fear is contagious. You've been taking their warnings, their horror stories, their assumptions, and you've been carrying them straight into your heart, questioning whether they actually even apply to you. But this is the thing. Again, you get to choose how to respond. You get to decide what penetrates your mind. You get to choose what voices you listen to, what stories you believe about your life. You have the power. You have the freaking power to separate inherited fear from personal truth. Because the reality is, people love talking about fear. People love being negative. This is just a truth of life. They cling to this idea that nothing is possible. Don't be optimistic. You're so stupid. Pessimism. I'm a realist. I'm a real. You know how many times I've heard someone say, I'm a realist? Oh, I'm so happy for you. People talk endlessly about their problems, their limitations. They talk about, oh, if I were president or if I were the whatever, this and that, I would do it this way. Yeah, buddy, sure, you know, because you're an expert in world economics. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying people are doing this on purpose. I'm just saying that as humans, we are prone to be more fear, negative, nihilistic based. It's just because it's the easier thing to do. It's easier to be negative than positive. Okay, so you just have to be careful that you're not allowing all this to be projected onto you because that's someone else's story and their story and how they see the world does not have to be your story and how you see the world. And the uncomfortable reality is that you've probably been letting other people drive your fear response. But again, once you come to recognize this, once you see the pattern, you can start to change it. You can start to filter what gets in and what needs to stay out. Because the goal isn't to never feel fear. Fear is always going to be there. In fact, we have to do many things with fear, but the goal is to make sure the fear you're feeling is at least actually yours, that it's based on reality and just at least not on other people's unprocessed traumas, negativity, and limitations. The perception shift is what we're going to be talking about next. So, we got into the truth about fear, how fears get planted within us, talked about culture, society, familiar, or whatever. Now we really need to get into perception. So let's say you're carrying all this fear. Some of it's yours, some of it's not, obviously, like we discussed. Most of it is from other places. and you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe even now angry that I've told you all this, and you're just annoyed at how everything seems to be negative, everyone seems to be negative. You want some encouragement. For someone to tell you that life is tough, but you're tougher, perhaps. Or at least this is how I know I felt. And on a very genuine and sincere level, this is how I felt. I was starving to be encouraged, and I was starving for someone to tell me, listen, yeah, you're going to hit road bumps all the time, actually, but you'll figure it out. So, this is where everything changed for me, and this is why I want to share it with you because, again, I just want to be a constant reminder that you have so much more power than you think. And it goes back to the quote that I mentioned briefly before, but we'll say again, which is if you cannot change a situation, change your perception of it. And again, at first, that probably sounds so fluffy and so easy and so fun, but sit with it for a minute. Really sit with it. Because what this is really saying is that most of our stress and fear doesn't come from life itself, it comes from how we respond to life. It's not just our response, but also how we feel about situations, the memories, emotions, associations that we've attached to circumstances. I want to give you an example, actually, a few of how this plays out. Let's go back to the financial security example. Maybe you have this deep fear about never making enough money to move out of your parents' house or never being able to afford rent in the city you actually want to live in. Where does that come from? Maybe you grew up hearing constant conversations about money being tight. Maybe you've absorbed all these societal messages about how Gen Z will never afford houses, how salaries don't match cost of living. That creates this narrative in your mind that you're destined to struggle financially. Fear attaches itself to the belief and makes a home there. But when you really examine it, how much of this fear is based on your actual current situation? How much is based on inherited stories? How much is based on, again, worst case scenarios you've never actually tested? Or think about perhaps career fears. What if I pick the wrong major and waste my degree? What if I can't find a job that actually pays enough? What if I'm still figuring out my life at 30 while everyone else has it together? The moment you express uncertainty about your future, people hit you with all the reasons to be scared. The job market is terrible. You need to get experience to get experience. Everyone's struggling right now. But again, what's actually true? What's perception and what's reality? Separating the wheat from the chaff. It is actually impossible to pivot. Oh, sorry. Is it actually impossible to pivot careers or find meaningful work? Or is it just what happens when you focus on worst case scenarios and other people's limitations, right? Like, yeah, you can get a new job. It might take time. You might be applying for 6 months while working at another job you hate, but you can. Here's another big example, relationships and comparison. Maybe you're scrolling through social media, seeing everyone else seemingly have their lives figured out, perfect relationship, dream car, amazing travels, or you're on dating apps feeling like all the emotionally intelligent people are taken. The fear creeps in. What if I never find someone? What if I'm behind everyone else my age? What if I'm too anxious to actually connect with people? Again, when you start to examine these fears closely, this is the fascinating thing that happens. You realize that most of them aren't actually rooted in truth. Sure, there may be some truth behind why you fear certain things, like the fact that moving to a new place involves unknowns or that relationships can end. But the fear becomes amplified by past experiences, stories you've heard, things you've seen, and again, assumptions you've never actually challenged. So when we go back to my three examples of not being able to, let's say, buy a house, feeling like everybody's relationship is great, but you don't have one, or you wanting to pivot jobs because you feel your job isn't meaningful, but there aren't new jobs out there. Is that actually the truth? Or are you just assuming all these things and never even having tried to take action steps in these areas? Again, try to take an action step with the whole figuring out how to save up for a house. Try to take an action step with maybe for 6 months to a year, trying to apply for new jobs, even with your old job that you hate. Taking out action steps about, I'm going to get on dating apps and I'm going to go on these dates with an optimistic point of view and not just think that there's no one out there for me, or start realizing that maybe Instagram isn't telling you everything about the perfect couple that you like. Like, again, you need to be questioning this stuff because the fear is real because you feel it, but it's not always true in the way that it controls you, and you need to dig deeper. And this is the perception shift. This is when you realize that you have the power to examine the stories you're telling yourself. Again, you need to ask, is this fear serving me? Or is this fear controlling me? Is this based on reality or is this based on perception? Whose voice is actually inside of my head? And here's the thing. When you start questioning your fears this way, when you almost start harassing them, when you start separating what's real from what's your own perception because of your past, you don't become reckless. You don't ignore genuine risks. You just stop letting imagined fears that, again, you haven't even tried, you've only heard from other people, stop running your freaking life. So, you start to see that you have choices. Like I said before, you have choices about how you seek out a romantic partner, how you might want to go about buying a house, how you might want to go about applying to a job. You have choices. Never, ever, ever think you don't have choices. You can choose how to interpret situations. You can choose what stories you believe about your life. You can choose what voices you listen to and what fears are worth carrying. And this is not toxic positivity. This is recognizing your power and also being practical. And it's taking back control of your own mind. And that is you driving your own car. All right, I feel in the last section I had to get a little bit preachy with you all. But I really wanted to just solidify that because I think sometimes we think that we're so stuck in choices and we're not. Maybe it's not the choice that we want that we can make as a choice, but it's still nonetheless a choice. And now I'm realizing that this is a long episode because I still have more to talk about. So, this part is going to be about building your mental armor. Now, this is a concept that I read about in a book that I will have linked. And it's totally escaping I can't think of the name of the book. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you've recognized that most of your fears are perception based, and you've started to separate what's actually yours from what's been projected onto you. Now, what do you do? Well, here I am to tell you. How do you actually protect yourself from getting overwhelmed by fear again, though? This is where the concept of mental armor comes in. And I have really loved this concept. Again, I still can't remember the name of the book, but I did share it on my Instagram stories. It's written by oh, here it is. I have it written down in my notes. It's called Becoming Bulletproof by a former Secret Service agent named Evie. And again, I absolutely loved it. I really wanted to pick up the book because what a unique perspective to have, right? You don't really hear of a lot of ex-Secret Service agents' writings. And I had heard her in a few interviews and I was very drawn to how she spoke. And yeah, I want to give her the credit for this idea because it's fully hers. So, mental armor isn't about becoming cold or detached from the world. And again, I'm taking all that she said and I'm putting it into my own words. And I'm now sharing the idea through my perspective as well. So, I want you to be clear on that. But mental armor is not about, again. So, let's start from the beginning. I paraphrased, but this is her idea. Mental armor isn't about becoming cold or detached from the world. It's not about shutting people out or pretending that nothing can hurt you. Mental armor is like a psychological barrier. It's a filter that helps you decide what gets in and what needs to stay out. It's about having boundaries with your own mind. Think of it like an inner firewall. Your boundary against people who want to diminish you, control you, or throw their unresolved trauma on your shoulders. When you build mental armor, you don't take things so personally anymore because you begin to see things for what they are. You don't internalize every situation, every negative comment because your armor takes the hit, not your heart. Now, obviously, for her, this was extremely useful because she was a law enforcement officer before she was a Secret Service agent. And I mean, she talk about law enforcement gets a lot of hate. And nobody really likes to be in their presence. And they get hit with a lot of commentary and stuff. And she talked about this and she talked about how she had to build this armor because if she was going to let that upset her every day, I mean, she would be having a bad day like every day. Like she wouldn't be able to get through it, right? So again, there's actually research on this and studies on people who have survived extreme situations. And this is research that she mentioned in her book. And a study was on people, again, who have survived extreme situations. One was the Holocaust survivors. And this study looked at what made some people mentally stronger than other during times of incredible suffering. And one of the main traits they found was this inner sense of sovereignty, a space inside that no one could touch. That and a sense of humor, which honestly to me makes so much sense. So, when you have a mental space that's truly yours, untouchable by outside forces, you protect your peace, you protect your hope, you protect your ability to see possibilities even when everyone around you is focused on problems. She used an example of it's like wrapping fine china in bubble wrap. If it's wrapped well, it can take a good load of hits and still be whole. But if it's not protected, even a light bump can leave a crack. That's how our minds are. It's if we're not guarding ourselves, the weight of life, the words of others, the fear all around us can easily break us down. But when your mind is protected and you've created this armor, an amazing thing happens. You take more risks, you show up, you put yourself out there. You're not constantly worried about what people think or say because you know your worth, you know that you're safe to do these things. Like you don't need to be afraid of criticism or failure because you're now equipped to handle it. And the people who try to knock you down, they lose their power of you because you can stay standing. You know that no, I don't have to let that in. That's not important. Now, the key thing about mental armor is it's not something you can wear all the time, right? You don't need to be guarded 24/7 and you shouldn't be because we're all still human. It's just a tool, not a lifestyle. You have to learn when to put it on when you need it and then to turn it off when it's not serving you. But how do you actually build this armor? Well, this is where something called, and she talked about it extensively in her book. I really loved it. The hormetic effect comes in and it is brilliant. The hormetic effect is simple. It's a small dose of stress that can actually make you stronger. Too much stress breaks you down, but just the right amount of stress teaches your body and mind how to adapt and bounce back. It's like going to the gym. Lifting weights creates tiny tears in your muscles, but over time, you rebuild stronger. This same concept applies to your mind. When you expose yourself to fear or discomfort in small, controlled ways, you begin to stretch your capacity. You get stronger, more grounded, less easily shaken, and this is how you build your mental armor in progression and over time. It's not overnight, it's not effortless, but you do it with you do it with consistency. And now I want to talk about how you can practically apply this mental armor concept to your life. And I'm going to take her 5 steps from her book. So step 1, expose. Start by identifying what small uncomfortable things you can intentionally face. Little fears, awkward conversations, taking a small risk. The key is it should challenge you, but just a little. Step 2, experience. Once you're in it, notice how you react. Do you freeze, run, get defensive? Just observe without judgment. Learn how your body and mind respond to fear. This is something she talked about a lot. You really need to know that when fear happens, how do you respond? Do you fight, flight, or freeze? You need to know which one so that then you can, again, not judge yourself, but learn how you want to respond accordingly. Step 3, adjust. Afterward, take what you learned and think about how you want to respond next time. What could you have done differently to face it better? Step 4, overcome. Pick one area to really focus on. You don't want to go crazy. Work on it, get better at it, practice the new response you want to build. And step 5, repeat. Keep doing it. Pick one fear at a time. Because resilience doesn't come from one brave moment, it comes from consistency. Again, back to how you would build a muscle. So, the key is to kill fear while it's still small. Don't wait until it grows into something that controls you. When you notice that first flicker of fear, challenge it, name it, and then using this idea of small doses, using this hormonic effect, I can't remember. You do it little by little because you expose yourself through micro stressors. So, to me, I loved this idea. It's something that I have really been implementing. Something, though, that I've noticed is some fears are very deeply embedded because I've let them go out of control. So, it might take me a little bit longer, but I've been applying it more to some smaller fears and going from there. But it's such a good idea of everybody knows exposure therapy is the right thing to do, but I'd never heard of this effect. And then I'd never heard of like her steps and like all this mental armor. So I loved it. I really put it all together. The food, the book was so much food for thought. And it really has helped me feel like I can take my power back by doing this in such a small way, which is why I wanted to share it with you. And yeah, this is how we build mental strength and a mental armor that no one can touch. So, we have a couple more sections, but it shouldn't be too much longer. I just wanted this podcast to be super thorough. And this part is going to be from fear to action. So, you understand that fear is perception. You've built some mental armor. You understand how fear can be contagious. Now, let's say you're practicing the hormetic effect with small doses of discomfort. But let's also get real about something else. Fear is never going to completely disappear. I think I said this before, but I want to reiterate it again. It's never going to disappear, and that's okay. Because what I've learned is that the antidote to fear is not the absence of it, it's just action. It's doing things scared. It's learning how to do what you want scared. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You don't have to wait until the fear goes away because it's not gonna. You don't have to have all the answers or feel completely confident. You just have to be willing to move forward with fear still riding shotgun with you. So think about it this way. Fear doesn't have to disappear. It just can't drive. You can acknowledge that it's there. You can even let it have a voice, but you don't want to let it make your decisions for you because you want to make sure you're in the driver's seat. And this is where the real work, I think, very much so begins, because this is where you start applying everything we've talked about to your actual life. I really have wanted all my episodes to be very, very practical again with actionable steps at the end, because that's how things actually get done in life. Like, you can hear a lovely idea about the Pythagorean theorem, but if you don't practice that theorem, who cares, right? So I want you to start with small things. Remember the hormonic effect that we just talked about. Apply it here. What is one small fear you could face this week? Maybe it's having a super awkward conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's applying for a job you don't think you're qualified for. Maybe it's going to this cute coffee shop, but you don't want to go alone because you're so scared of how people will perceive you. Maybe it's setting a boundary with someone who has been projecting their fears onto you. Again, pick something manageable, start small, something that scares you just a little bit, but not so much that it paralyzes you. Do that thing and notice how you feel before, during, and after. And if you've already done that thing, you're going to be able to realize, oh, I survived. Oh, I figured it out. Oh, I can do this. And starting out with those small things then lead up to the bigger challenges. To me, when we do this is how you build confidence, right? Not by waiting for it to magically appear, but by proving to yourself over and over again that you can handle more than you think you can. If there is truly, oh my gosh, there's so many things passing on the street. It's so annoying. I'm here in Denmark and I'm on a lounge street. Okay. If there is one thing that has built up my confidence so much, it's doing things that I'm scared of and proving to myself that I can do that. Because it's such a confidence booster. And if you were like me, and maybe you were starving for encouragement, like I talked about before in this podcast, when you felt you really wanted someone to tell you, you've got this, but no one around you is actually saying that, give it to yourself. Do it for yourself and create that voice and be that person for yourself in your own head. Because I had to learn a long time ago, I'm probably just not going to get that. I'm probably not going to get someone encouraging me, and I need to get over that. And it sucks, but it helped me move forward. And I realized that at some point, I was waiting for someone else to believe in me, to encourage me, to tell me I was capable of more than everyone was suggesting. But the thing is, I needed to do that for myself. I needed to stop waiting. I needed to take responsibility for my own life. Because listen, it's one thing when you're younger to blame the world for everything and want all these things and want life to be different, but it's a whole different story when you're now a grown ass adult and you're moping about things. And listen, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to be the tough person to tell you because I had to be the tough person to tell myself. Stop waiting around. You're an adult now. Take matters into your own hands. And you know what? What I've learned is the people that are encouraging in the way I wanted them to be are far few and in between, but they're out there. They are out there. They're just scarce. And when you get that person in your life, appreciate them so, so much because again, you need to take responsibility for your own life. You can't control what other people say, what fears they try to plant to you, what they tell you, but you can control what voice gets the loudest volume in your head. And I really hope that's yours. And you can choose to feed yourself hope and encouragement. And again, stop waiting for someone else. And let me tell you something. When you start doing this consistently, when you start facing your fears in small doses and talking to yourself the way you wish others would talk to you, something really does shift. You gain confidence. You feel more in control. You have more trust within yourselves. You realize that most of the things you were afraid of weren't nearly as scary as your mind made them out to be. And it doesn't stop there because here's the beautiful thing about courage. It's contagious as well. Just like fear spreads from person to person, so does bravery, so does hope. When you start showing up differently, when you start choosing action over fear, when you start encouraging yourself and others instead of defaulting to the negativity that's all around you, you change the energy around you. You become the person who says, that sounds amazing. You should go for it. Instead of listing all the reasons why something won't work, you become the person who believes in possibilities instead of problems. You become the voice of encouragement that you were starving to hear. And I know it's so cliche, but Gandhi said it best. Be the change you want to see in the world. Stop complaining about how you want the world to bend over backwards and change for you. Just be it. Just be it. And that matters more than you realize because there are other people out there, people just like you, who are perhaps drowning in negativity, carrying fears around that aren't theirs, starving for someone to believe in them. And they need someone to tell them. But when choose courage, when you choose hope, when you choose good, you're not just changing your own life. You're actually showing up for other people as well. You're showing others that you can drive your own car too. This is how you do it. This is how you acknowledge that fear will always be a part of your life and your ride, but you build your mental armor. You practice this hormetic effect. You choose action over paralysis. You feed yourself the encouragement you need and you keep on going. One small brave step at a time because the truth is, like I always say, life is tough, but you are tougher. So get in the car and keep on driving. Let's bring this all together and let's wrap it up in a pretty bow. Because at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. You're the driver of your own life. And listen, I know I've said this a lot. I know it might sound simple, but again, think about what this actually means. It means you get to decide. You have agency. You have choices. You get to choose what fears you want to carry around. You get to choose what penetrates your mind and what gets filtered out by your mental armor or what you want to keep in and think about. But let's also be real about something. Like I titled this, life will always be risky. Bad things will happen. And this isn't pessimism. This is also reality because optimism has to be balanced somewhat with reality. As somebody that considers themselves very optimistic, you have to be sensible. And being sensible is, again, realizing bad things will happen. Relationships end. People disappoint you. Jobs are lost. Health issues arise. Dreams won't always work out the way you planned. Economic situations change. Global events happen that are completely outside of your control. Nothing in life is guaranteed. And that's a guarantee. But here's what's also true. You'll figure it out. You'll survive. A bunch of things that are so unprecedented, things that you didn't see coming up, will come up, but you'll figure it out when you get there. You will adapt. You will find a way through because that's what humans do. If we want to be, we're incredibly resilient creatures. Incredibly resilient creatures. And again, while you can't control what happens to you, you always can control how you respond. You control what story you tell yourself. You control the fears you have. You control whether you choose action or paralysis. Again, this is your power. This is what it means to be the driver. It doesn't mean you're not going to feel scared. It doesn't mean you'll always know exactly where you're going or have the perfect route mapped out. It doesn't mean the road will always be smooth or that you won't face unexpected detours. Like I said, those bad things, they are actually guaranteed. But it means you can keep your hands on the wheel. It means you don't let fear take over the driver's seat. It means you don't hand the keys over to other people's negativity or society's doom and gloom messaging. Remember what we talked about at the beginning. Fear is contagious. I think it's spiritual. It shows up in our cities, on our screens, in our conversations, and sometimes in our minds. Well, sometimes all the time in our minds. And it's trying to convince us that we're powerless, that we're not good enough, that we're not worthy, that nothing good is possible, that the good ran out, that we should just start going to the ocean with a teaspoon and not a bucket. To stay parked where we are. Everything's scary. Everything's doom and gloom. Nothing works out for me. Fear is contagious. But you know what's also contagious and what's also spiritual? Courage and hope. And courage and hope are just as contagious. Every time you choose to face a fear instead of avoiding it, every time you encourage someone instead of discouraging this, every time you choose hope over despair, you're spreading something different. You're changing the energy within you and around you. And people don't take this seriously enough. Stop saying stuff about yourself that is negative. Stop saying you're stupid. Stop saying you can't figure it out. Stop saying you're not good enough. You do realize that your words carry so much power. And I don't even play with stuff like that. I don't play around with saying that I'm stupid, that I'm going to get sick, that, my back is going to go out when I'm older. Like there's this sick humor around saying these awful things about ourselves and our health and just everything. Do not take part in that. I take that so freaking seriously. So again, you can choose courage. You can choose hope. And that's what matters, because I want you to understand something. We all have a sphere of influence. All of us. Some people just have lower pedestals than others. But people are watching you. People who are drowning in the same fears you've learned to face, they're watching you. And when you choose courage, when you choose hope, when you give them permission, you then give them permission to choose courage and hope as well. When you refuse to let fear drive your life, you show them that they don't have to let fear drive theirs either. This is bigger than just personal growth. This is about changing the narrative. This is about refusing to accept that fear and negativity are just the way things are. This is about choosing to be part of the solution instead of the problem. So here's what I want you to remember. Fear is always going to exist. It's going to whisper in your ear. It's going to try to convince you to take the safe route, to listen to the critics, to believe that you're not capable of more, to be a realist. But you have the power to turn down the volume on that voice. You have the power to build mental armor that protects your peace and your hope. You have the power to choose action over paralysis, courage over comfort, growth over stagnation. You are the driver of your life. And again, the road is going to be scary. Expect monsters. There are risks involved when you really list. To live is to risk. To drive is to risk. But the alternative to the people that say, this is ridiculous, the only alternative you have is staying parked, playing it safe, letting fear be the driver of your life, letting it make your decisions, and never truly living. Again, you might be thinking, Maria, this all sounds nice, but it's unrealistic for me, and I get it. But again, what is the alternative? Living in fear, absorbing constant negativity, never daring to believe that there could be more out there for you, never going to the ocean with a bucket instead of a teaspoon? The alternative is allowing other people to drive your own life and you having no real sense of agency. The alternative to facing your fears is being controlled by them. The alternative to choosing hope is accepting that fear gets the final say in your story. Don't be that person. Please don't be the person that chooses that, because that's the alternative if you don't take the route that I'm talking. So here's your challenge this week. Identify one small fear you can face. Notice whose fears you've been carrying around that aren't even yours. Practice saying no to fear-based input, whether that's certain news feeds, negative conversations, or that voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like someone else's doubts. Friends, to truly drive is to risk. To truly drive is the risk. And here's the bigger picture I want you to remember. Your courage impacts others. Your hope impacts others. Every time you choose hope over fear, you're changing the narrative. You're not just driving your own car, you're showing others they can drive theirs too. You're not driving alone. You're part of a community of people who have now chosen courage, who refuse to let fear, negativity, pessimism have the final say, who believe that good things are still possible in this very difficult, nuanced, impossible to understand, cruel, but also so beautiful at the same time world that we live in. You need to decide which route you want to take, which person you want to be. But I'm here to remind you that you are the driver in your life. So get in your car, start your engine, and get driving, because to truly drive is to risk.